Hi. I'm sorry about yesterday. Miss Sonic wasn't feeling very good, so I'm back now. I feel a little bit better. We are gonna keep right on with reading our Eric Carle books, and tonight we're gonna read a book that Miss Sonic really likes, which I know Miss Sonic says that she likes every book, but I really do like this book. It's called Mr. Seahorse, and the author is Eric Carle, and he's also the illustrator. So he painted all the nice pictures in it, and he wrote the words in it, and it's called Mr. Seahorse. Mr. and Miss Seahorse drifted gently through the sea. Miss Seahorse began to wiggle and twist this way and that. "It's time for me to lay my eggs," she said. "Can I help?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Oh, yes, thank you," said Miss Seahorse, and she laid her eggs into a pouch on Mr. Seahorse's belly. "I'll take good care of our eggs," said Mr. Seahorse. "I promise." So it's time for Miss Seahorse to have her eggs, and she put her belly next to Mr. Seahorse, and he's going to hold her eggs in a little pouch on his belly like a kangaroo. And he says, "I'm going to take really good care of them." He promises. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a group of trumpet fish hidden in a patch of reeds. And can you count the trumpet fish? There's 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 trumpet fish. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Stickleback?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Delighted," replied Mr. Stickleback. "I just built a nest, and right away Miss Stickleback laid her eggs into it. Now I am taking good care of them until they hatch." "Keep up the good work," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. So Mr. Stickleback made a nest, and Miss Stickleback laid all of her little eggs in it, and now Mr. Stickleback is going to watch it and make sure to take very good care of it. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a lionfish hidden behind a coral reef. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Tilapia?" asked Mr. Seahorse. Mr. Tilapia couldn't answer. His mouth was full of eggs. "Oh, I know," said Mr. Seahorse. "Miss Tilapia laid her eggs. Now you are taking good care of them until they hatch." Mr. Tilapia nodded his head. "You must be very happy," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. So Mr. Stickleback had his eggs in a nest, and Mr. Tilapia is carrying them in his mouth, and they're watching them, making sure they take very good care of them. And if you remember, Mr. Seahorse is carrying their eggs in his belly. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a pair of leaf fish hidden among the seaweed. We have 1, 2 leaf fish. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Curtis?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Perfectly fine," replied Mr. Curtis. "Miss Curtis laid her eggs, and I have stuck them on my head. Now I'm taking good care of them until they hatch." "You are doing a good job," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. Do you see all the little eggs on his head? As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a stonefish hidden behind a rock. Scary looking fish. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Pipe?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Couldn't be better," replied Mr. Pipe. "Miss Pipe laid her eggs along my belly. Now I'm taking good care of them until they hatch. You should feel proud of yourself," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. Mr. Pipe has his eggs on his belly. And before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Bullhead?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Tip-top," replied Mr. Bullhead. Miss Bullhead laid her eggs, and the eggs hatched, and now I'm babysitting. "You are doing a fine job," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. Mr. Bullhead has all of his little fish babies. There's lots of them. He said Miss Bullhead laid her eggs and they already hatched, and now he's watching them. The time had come for the seahorse babies to be born. Mr. Seahorse wiggled and twisted this way and that, and at last the babies tumbled from Mr. Seahorse's pouch and swam away. One baby turned around and tried to come back into the pouch. "Oh no," said Mr. Seahorse. "I do love you, but now you are ready to be on your own." So Mr. Seahorse carried his eggs in his pouch until it was time for them to hatch, and then you can see all of the little seahorses coming out of his belly. And he tells them they're ready to be on their own. So the author of our story was Carle. He is also the illustrator for our story. We know that he paints all these really beautiful pictures. The setting where the story takes place, where do you think they were in the story? There was a lot of fish. They were in the ocean. And then the characters are the people or animals in the story. And this story had a main character and then lots of other characters. They were all fish. There's Mr. Seahorse. He's the main character. And then he met lots of other fish along the way, like when he met Mr. Tilapia. Mr. Tilapia is a character in the story. And if you go back, you can probably find other characters like Mr. Curtis. He met a lot of other fish while he was swimming. So that's Mr. Seahorse by Carle. And I hope you liked it because I really like that story.